Cren the weight of silence. That evening changed everything I thought I knew about love and boundaries. Our home was wrapped in stillness, silver moonlight filtering through the blinds. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind drifted between exhaustion and an emptiness I couldn't quite explain. My husband, Daniel, had been traveling for work, 3 weeks gone, another 2 ahead. I'd convinced everyone I was managing just fine, but solitude has a way of settling into your bones. When I heard the soft click of my door, I assumed I'd imagined it. Then a silhouette appeared in the frame. Marcus, my son, stood there, outlined by the faint hallway light. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mom, you still up?" Something in his tone made my chest tighten. This wasn't the child who once crawled into my bed after nightmares. His words carried something heavier, something hidden. I pushed myself upright, pulling the covers close. "What is it?" He paused before entering. His steps were careful, measured, the way someone moves when they're afraid of shattering something delicate. "I can't shut my brain off," he finally said. "There's too much going on in here." I gestured toward the mattress. "Talk to me." He lingered near the entrance as if questioning whether he belonged any closer. Then, gradually, he crossed the room and lowered himself onto the bed's edge. His fingers were laced tight, his posture rigid. "Everything feels strange now," he admitted. "Like I don't belong anywhere anymore." His words cut deeper than I expected. Marcus had always been my steady one, my anchor. Hearing him sound so adrift made something inside me ache. "You're evolving," I offered gently. "Growth often disguises itself as grief, but it isn't." He gave a small nod, though his gaze stayed fixed on the carpet. After a long silence, he lifted his eyes, and the vulnerability there left me breathless. "It's more complicated than that," he whispered. "It's about you." The atmosphere shifted. My breath stalled. "Men." His nod was slow, deliberate. "You're the only person who makes me feel grounded, like I can actually be myself. But sometimes I wonder if that's appropriate. Sometimes I experience things I can't make sense of." The sincerity in his confession struck me harder than I anticipated. There was no intent, no line crossed, just bewilderment, tenderness, and anguish tangled together. I wanted to offer wisdom, something meaningful. But all that escaped was a murmur. "Marcus, it's okay to feel uncertain." His eyes dropped again, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm terrified," he confessed. "Of what this means, of whatever's happening inside me." I placed my hand gently on his forearm. "You're not damaged," I said. "You're simply human. Emotions don't always follow logic. That doesn't mean they control your identity." We sat without speaking. The quiet between us was substantial, but not harsh, like standing at the rim of something vast, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. "Would you like to stay here tonight?" I asked softly. "You don't have to wrestle with these thoughts alone." He nodded, his tension easing slightly. As he settled beside me, his breathing gradually slowed. And though I told myself this was merely comfort, a mother sheltering her child, part of me sensed it was something deeper. The beginning of a confrontation neither of us was prepared to face. Morning light brought no relief. It only illuminated the weight the darkness had left behind. I woke before Marcus, his breathing steady beside me. For a moment I watched him, my son, yet no longer a boy, and confusion flooded through me. Nothing physical had occurred, but something invisible had shifted, and I couldn't name it. I slipped out quietly, wrapping myself in a robe. The mirror caught my reflection, wary eyes, tangled hair, a face that seemed decades older than yesterday. The woman staring back felt like a stranger. In the kitchen, I sought refuge in routine. Coffee dripping, eggs sizzling, bread toasting. These were sounds that once made the house feel alive. Now each noise echoed against the silence stretching between us. Marcus appeared minutes later, hair disheveled, shadows beneath his eyes. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," I replied, forcing a faint smile. He sat at the table, and I felt his gaze even as I turned to pour the coffee. I didn't want him noticing my unsteady hands. "Did you rest?" I asked. He nodded, though his voice betrayed him. "Some. You." "Barely." We both understood why. His words from the night before lingered like mist, the honesty he'd shared, his confusion, his affection, replaying with painful clarity. "I meant everything I said," he murmured suddenly. I stiffened. "Marcus." He met my eyes, and there was that same raw openness from before. "You think I don't realize it's wrong to feel this way. I do. I just can't switch it off." My heart contracted. "You're not supposed to switch it off. You're supposed to trace it to its source. You've been isolated. I've been preoccupied. Maybe that's all this is. Confusion bred from distance." He leaned forward, urgency in his tone. "But what if it goes deeper? What if it's genuine? Marcus, affection doesn't always signify what we assume," I said gently. "Sometimes we confuse longing with love, proximity with belonging." That's what this is, a search for connection, not something to pursue. His jaw clenched, his gaze falling. You think I don't know that. You think I chose this. His voice fractured on the final word. I don't know how to stop feeling. I inhaled deeply and reached for his hand. He didn't withdraw. You don't stop feeling, I said softly. You mature through it. You let time reshape it. For an extended moment, we sat in stillness. The only sound was the refrigerator's quiet hum. I wanted to tell him I understood more than he realized, that loneliness can warp love into shapes it shouldn't take. But instead I said, we'll survive this. We just need to maintain the boundary between comfort and confusion. He nodded slowly, though his eyes revealed that comprehension didn't ease the struggle. That evening, when we passed each other in the corridor, there was no conversation, only a look that stretched too long, and a silence that spoke everything neither of us dared voice. For the first time in years, I feared love. Not because it caused pain, but because it had begun dissolving the line between right and wrong. The days that followed felt like navigating through haze. Familiar forms, familiar rhythms, but nothing distinct. I moved through daily tasks, responding to messages, tending the garden, calling Daniel when possible. He discussed schedules and airports, never once inquiring how I was coping. Perhaps that was simpler. His absence created a void, and Marcus had filled it without either of us intending. One evening, I returned home later than usual. The house was dim, the air carrying the scent of rain. Marcus sat on the sofa, a book open on his lap, though he wasn't reading. He glanced up as I entered, and for a prolonged moment, we simply looked at each other, two souls bound by something we couldn't identify, frightened by what it might represent. You didn't reply to my texts, he said quietly. I needed distance? I answered. We both did. He nodded, but I noticed disappointment flash across his features. I understand, he murmured. Doesn't make it simpler. I set my bag down and sat across from him. Marcus, what transpired between us? Even the things left unspoken, they carry weight, but they don't define us. He frowned, confusion tightening his expression. Then what are we supposed to do? Act like none of it occurred? No, I said softly, but we must recognize it for what it was. You reached out because you were lost, and I allowed my loneliness to respond instead of my wisdom. He leaned closer, his eyes searching mine. So you do feel it too? My breath caught. I feel many things, I admitted, but feeling something doesn't justify pursuing it. Love, sometimes it's merely displaced need wearing the wrong label. Neither of us spoke. The only sound was rain tapping gently against the windows. Then Marcus rose, pacing slowly across the room. I wish things were straightforward, he said. That we could return to before I said anything. I smiled faintly, though my eyes burned. You can't erase truth, Marcus, but you can choose what to build from it. He stopped beside me, shoulders tense, voice low. So where do I go from here? You live, I said. You grow. You learn to love someone who can return that love without fracturing you in the process. The words settled heavily in the air. He nodded slowly, understanding forming in his expression. For the first time in weeks, the strain between us began dissolving, replaced by something quieter, forgiveness. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of his room. He was already asleep, his face serene, peaceful, almost like the child he once was. I closed the door halfway and leaned against the frame, releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been clutching. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be effortless. The heart doesn't erase what it's experienced. It only learns to carry it differently. But perhaps that was sufficient. Perhaps love in its truest form was recognizing when to pause before destroying what matters most. As I extinguished the lights and walked to my own room, I whispered a silent vow to choose clarity over comfort, to let the silence between us become restoration instead of temptation. And somewhere deep within, I hoped that someday he would comprehend that love doesn't require possession to be authentic. Sometimes, it simply needs to be released.